Melanie Richardson, a Black attorney, dared to challenge a powerful judge, becoming a symbol of resistance against a system protecting privilege over justice. Now, as Chief Justice, she faces the very judge who once humiliated her. Judge Henry Bennett appeared as if strictness itself had come to life. His piercing eyes constantly seemed to search people for secrets, and his neatly combed gray hair and perfectly pressed robe only underscored his severity. Known for his iron rule in the courtroom, Bennett demanded respect for the law and tolerated no challenges to his authority. When Melanie Richardson, a Black defense attorney, entered, he barely glanced at her, already deciding she was another idealist here to lecture the court. His eyes flashed with irritation at the audacity of a Black woman speaking up in his courtroom. Interrupting her opening statement, he remarked curtly, "I don't see any need for your opinion, Ms. Richardson. The justice system knows how to function without outside interference." Melanie remained unfazed, her gaze steady, hiding her outrage. Accustomed to such treatment, she ignored his disdain and presented her arguments with composure. Bennett interrupted often, dismissing her words, while other attorneys exchanged amused glances, some muttering that the judge knows how to put people like her in their place. But Melanie's resolve only grew. Despite the humiliation, she was determined to continue, knowing this case was merely the start of a long road. She would play by his rules for now, but one day, the rules would change. A few days later, as Melanie Richardson entered Judge Bennett's courtroom again, a feeling of heaviness lingered. This time she was representing a young Black woman accused of a minor offense, a petty shoplifting charge. Melanie knew that, in reality, the case could easily have been resolved with a simple warning. But for Judge Bennett, the defendant's skin color was enough reason to treat the case with particular severity. Judge Bennett was waiting for Melanie, cold and detached, ready to demean both her and her client once more. As soon as Melanie began her defense, Bennett abruptly cut her off, raising his finger as if to signal she had no right to speak until he permitted it. "Ms. Richardson," he said mockingly, "do you really think you can bring social justice into this courtroom and expect it to work? The system you so fervently criticize has existed far longer than you and those like you." Each word dripped with contempt, and his gaze was full of scorn. But this time, Melanie decided she had nothing left to lose. She risked speaking up and casting aside her usual caution, firmly and clearly stated, "If your justice system cannot protect all its citizens, it cannot call itself just, Your Honor. This young woman deserves a defense, not your biased judgment. If the law is only for the chosen few, does that mean there's no place for the rest of us in this courtroom?" For a moment, the courtroom was filled with a tense, almost stormy silence. Judge Bennett's face reddened, his eyes, like steel blades, fixed on Melanie's face. He was stunned by her audacity and enraged that she dared to question his authority and the system he so meticulously protected. "That's enough," he thundered, his voice echoing through the room. "I am calling a recess. Ms. Richardson, leave the court. This is not your place if you cannot show respect." Melanie stood motionless, her determination unwavering. Her words about discrimination and bias resonated so powerfully that they left not only the judge, but everyone present in a state of shock. A murmur ran through the room. People began to exchange glances, discussing her bold declaration. Some of the attorneys looked at her with respect, while a few elderly judges nodded thoughtfully, as if hearing the truth of her words for the first time. Melanie knew there would be a high price for her words. Her career might be at risk, and Judge Bennett might try to remove her from the bar. But today, she had achieved something more. She had been heard. After the courtroom incident, the story spread like wildfire across the city. Black female attorney takes on judge. The headlines flashed in the news, drawing public attention. Intense debates erupted on social media and forums, with people discussing Melanie Richardson's courage and Judge Bennett's obstinance. Video clips of her speech, where she stated that the law has no right to divide citizens by skin color, flooded the internet. With every hour, her name appeared more frequently on news channels, and thousands shared her story. Support for her grew, with many viewing her as the voice of a new fight for rights and equality. Gradually, the courthouse became a gathering point for those demanding justice. People showed up with signs that read, "Justice for all," "End bias," and "One law for all." Crowds filled the streets, and protests intensified daily, drawing journalists from across the country. For Judge Bennett, this was unfamiliar territory. He had always been used to respect, albeit sometimes grudgingly. His colleagues, other judges, had always treated him with deference, acknowledging his authority and status. He ran his courtroom like a commander, secure in his right to demean and dictate. But now, he was in the spotlight, as if under a magnifying glass, and this attention was far from respectful. Initially, he tried to ignore the commotion, dismissing it as a fleeting surge of interest. But with each mention of his name, each angry social media post, and each interview with Melanie's supporters, his confidence began to crack. The news started calling him the biased judge, the face of the old system. Each day brought more criticism, and Bennett could feel his carefully constructed reputation crumbling before his eyes. Now he saw that Melanie Richardson's story was becoming a symbol of something far greater than a mere court case. It was a challenge to the very system he had spent his life defending, a system where he had always held the role of indisputable judge. But now, faced with mounting public outrage and calls for change, he realized that this struggle might mark the beginning of the end of his career if he didn't heed the winds of change. The day came when Melanie Richardson and Judge Bennett found themselves face to face within the walls of the Supreme Court. The atmosphere in the hall was both tense and solemn. Majestic columns, high ceilings, and rows of seats filled with high-ranking officials, attorneys, and activists gave the occasion a sense of grandeur. The room was filled with a silence that carried the anticipation of something monumental. Judge Henry Bennett entered the courtroom, standing straight as usual, scanning the room. But his confidence immediately faltered when his gaze landed on the head seat at the table. There, in a sharp, dark suit and with her head held high, sat Melanie Richardson. Her expression was calm and dignified, and the judge instantly understood that this woman was no longer just a defense attorney. She was now the Chief Justice. Judge Bennett's face went pale. He felt his palms grow cold, and his heart beat furiously. Not long ago, he had allowed himself to treat her with disdain, certain of his right to control the fates of others. But now, he was facing a new reality. Melanie Richardson, the very person he had scorned, was now his superior, standing above him in the judicial hierarchy. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Melanie as she rose from her seat and confidently stepped toward the podium. Her voice was clear, solemn, and firm, reaching the heart of everyone listening. "Today," she began, "we are gathered not to pass judgment on a single individual, but to remind ourselves that the law must protect everyone, regardless of their status, origin, or skin color. Justice is not a privilege for the few, but a right for everyone. We are building a society where every person will have a chance to be heard and defended." Melanie spoke of principles of equality and integrity, of the strength of the law rooted in its neutrality and honesty. Her words were directed at everyone but rang especially loud for Judge Bennett, who stood silently, unable to hide his sense of powerlessness. With each word, he realized how profoundly he had been mistaken in his belief in his unassailable authority. Today, he was witnessing the birth of a new era, where his outdated beliefs and prejudices were being cast aside in favor of true justice. Melanie finished her speech with a powerful call for accountability to every citizen who would ever enter a courtroom expecting protection and fair treatment. The hall erupted in applause, and everyone there understood that change had come. Judge Bennett stood in silence, acknowledging her righteousness and his own helplessness in the face of a new system. A system that would now be fair to all, without exception.